So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us in the world. Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch Salesforce Admin's webinar, So You Inherited or Created a Mess, Now What? Our speakers today, I'm thankfully so privileged to be joined by Dale Ziegler, who is a Salesforce administrator of 5 years. He's a solo admin at Kansas City Southern Railway. He supports over 200 users. You can follow him at dzig11 on the Twitter. My name is Mike Gerholt, Senior Manager, Admin Evangelism at Salesforce. You can follow me at Mike Gerholt. And of course, it wouldn't be a Salesforce presentation without our forward-looking statement. Please make all purchasing decisions based on current features and functionality and not on any new features or functionality we may mention in this webinar. Of course, the webinars are always fun, but we want you to be social with us. So we are on the Twitter at Salesforce Admins, no I, and you can connect with other Salesforce admins using the hashtag AwesomeAdmin. If you're on Facebook, you can find our page and be sure to like it for constant updates. It is Salesforce Admins. We make it super easy on you. And on YouTube, we are also Salesforce Admins, which reminds me that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube page and, of course, on the webinar recap page, which is the same URL that you use to register. So questions. I know you probably have questions during this webinar, and we want to help answer them for you. So we've made it super easy. You can join our Salesforce Admins webinar group on the Success community. You can just search for it, Salesforce Admin Webinars, or this super simple, easy bit.ly link, go to bit.ly/admin webinar group, and don't be afraid to wait until the end to ask questions. We have experts on hand. And of course, at the very end, we'll ask some live Q&A to Dale. So with that, I definitely want to get things started. I'm going to turn it over to Dale with our agenda. So Dale, how are we going to start cleaning up our orgs?
Well, thank you, Mike. We are going to clean up our orgs with 3 key steps: evaluating your org, actually creating a plan to do so, and then leveraging all your available resources. So first up, evaluating our orgs. Well, the first step in fixing a problem is admitting that you have one. So that means realizing that your org is a mess. And there's a number of different things that constitute a mess. Some of the most common ones come around security profiles, that users either have way too many permissions to do way too many things, or the other end of it, not enough permissions to actually do what they need to do. Every user can end up with their own profile because one person needs to do one more thing that another person doesn't, and too many fields. It's a common misperception that Salesforce is just like a spreadsheet. Therefore, we should use every single column, every single field we possibly can. And Salesforce is a relational database, so not using any lookup relationships to allow the objects to talk to each other. The first thing you're going to do is actually learn about your data as well as your metadata. And there are several great tools out there that are incredibly cost-effective. And when I say cost-effective, I mean free. Whenever you activate your Salesforce org, you get reports and dashboards. Standard. Every shred of data is reportable. Every report can be dashboardable. Reports and data and everything is not just for your sales users and for your customer service users. It's for you as well as the admin to actually monitor data integrity, set up exception reports. It's on you to ultimately make sure that everything in Salesforce is clean. So use reports to start to pull together some of what it is you know you need to analyze. The data loader and Workbench are also great tools that allow you to export all your data out into Office products. They'll export out to CSVs. You can manipulate in Excel. I personally like to then link those CSVs into Access, where I have more robust SQL queries, just about the same as SQL. You can then get, you can have updated data sets to load back into Salesforce to, again, meet your metrics of cleanliness. And then a couple of apps out on the App Exchange. Field Trip is probably my most favorite of the favorite, where you are able to actually analyze field usage by object. Field Trip will go through and run, it can look at every single record on your table. You can actually also write a more refined where clause for instance, where all records on an object where the record type is this, or if a checkbox field is true. What is returned is an analysis of every single field on the object and how many records or the percentage of records that are populated. How this helps you is if you have higher percentages of population, you know that's a widely used field, and so it's one to probably keep. But when you get down into the lower percentages, 1, 2, or even 0%, maybe you start to ask the question, why do we have this field? Is this information being captured elsewhere? Is it even necessary? So you can make notes on what is necessary and what's not. And then Octopus will run a full-scale analysis on the metadata, which is data about data. Octopus will allow you to export your workflow rules, your Apex classes, your validation rules, everything about the structure for you to evaluate in a PDF, in a Word document, which is great for starting documentation. If you need to go even more granular and start analyzing what you have, you can actually copy-paste out of Word into Excel and filter down where are you missing help text, where do you potentially have duplicate field text. So those are phenomenal apps to get you started learning about the information already in your org. Then you need to figure out the genesis, the when and the how of what's already in Salesforce. Your org, all your objects, all your fields, every entity in Salesforce comes with a created by who and a created when field. So if you're lucky, you can tap the person on the shoulder that created a particular object. Hopefully there's description fields populated, but these are all nuggets of information that will help you understand the how did we get here. If you have the created date and you know what the landscape of your company was in terms of where Salesforce was, you can put things into context to understand we may have created this because of this initiative that was going on 2, 3, 4 years ago. And then going forward, any new functionality that you create, make sure you populate those description fields so that hopefully it doesn't become a mess again, but if it does, your successors can go back and do the same detective work, the same analysis to right size and rectify the problem. Then it's time to meet with your stakeholders, and that's going to be a pretty massive time commitment. When I say stakeholders, I mean the people who are currently using Salesforce, but also those who have expressed interest in using Salesforce. I can speak to that our collections team here at my company is very interested in getting into Salesforce. They would like to use the case object to prop up their credit application, which coincides with customer service interactions. They're not in today. They want to be. So as I start to think about rebuilding things, I know I should be scheduling time with them. As you schedule time with your stakeholders, though, make sure to block out time for your personal commitments. Block out time for decompress time. Block out time to actually start to chunk through the notes that you just gathered. Because if you go 40 hours a week just having meetings with stakeholders, you are going to lose some of that information that perhaps you didn't write down, and you're just going to get exhausted. So plan your time accordingly until you've captured everything that you need. And once you've captured everything that you need, you're going to need a mechanism to track it. Well, what better place to track the work that needs to be done on Salesforce than in Salesforce? There are some great project management apps out on the App Exchange that you can pull in. A lot of admins and developers will actually add a record type to their case object because really cases were born as a customer service mechanism. Your customer service team is working with your external customers to resolve issues. Well, your users are your customers. So use some of that standard functionality like the case comments and the ability to email out of cases and capture that dialogue until the case or request is resolved. Or if you're like I was a couple of years ago before we completely rebuilt it, our case object was so massively overtaxed I had to build a custom object. So I built the issues and enhancements log. No matter which path you go down, the key things that you need to track are who requested it. Is it something that's broken? Is it an enhancement? Is it a brand new process? Is it maybe some data work you need to do? But what is the actual type of work? And allow your users to contribute an expected deadline. When do they need it by? And then in turn, you can provide an estimated data deliverable, which captures that entire conversation and dialogue and progress right there in Salesforce. So now it's time to create your plan. You've captured all your requirements. You've met with your stakeholders. You have all the nitty-gritty of the things that you need to do, but now you need to figure out your actual development, fix, implementation plan. So there's two schools of thought when it comes to development. I'm a lifelong baseball fan, and there's really two ways to play the game of baseball. You can either have your power hitters who swing for the fences every single time, but statistically also are known to strike out because they're trying way too hard, or you can take the small ball approach, where quick wins like singles and doubles and walks and stolen bases get you one run at a time, but it keeps the fans interested because you're slowly getting to that end result of the big win. Same thing with development and administration in Salesforce. If you decide you're going to swing for the fences, you could actually, in effect, be going dark for several months while you hole yourself up in your sandbox to make all the fixes and to build the new functionality while you're not doing anything to production. Well, if you already have a mess of an org, chances are your adoption is low. If you're not doing anything to the actual production, customer-facing interface, people are going to forget about Salesforce and probably go find another solution. Then, once you do have your package of stuff ready in the sandbox and it's ready to deploy, well, you run the risk of it not fully working because you just tried to do everything in one fell swoop. I personally prefer the small ball approach where, okay, I'm going to add one custom object here and start capturing information. And as I'm advertising that and selling that to my users, hey, fall in love with this. I swear you're going to love it. Start contributing information. I'm going to go back to the sandbox and work on the next piece of maybe a little bit of automation. Maybe it's a workflow, a couple of workflow rules. Maybe it's a process builder. Maybe it's a few new fields. Keep delivering those small amounts iteratively. It becomes a snowball of momentum to where your users actually do become very excited. And in the end, because you've been testing and deploying these small bits one at a time, you don't run the risk of completely striking out at the end because you know everything has worked to that point and everybody's happy because ultimately you still gave them everything. So what are some of the actual problems? Well, we mentioned earlier, way too many fields. That top half of the slide is a screenshot from a second org in my company that handles freight claims. I work for the railroad. It was propped up 6-7 years ago by a VP, which right there sends up red flags. Going back to knowing the who and when your org was set up, if you hear VP, you probably have a problem. The VP didn't understand database structure, nor would I expect a VP to, but as I started to dig deeper upon his retirement and me inheriting the keys to that kingdom, what I found was that 390 of those 439 fields were 13 questions about the possibility of 30 rail cars on a train in a derailment. I asked the questions, so what happens if you have 31 cars on a train? Oh, we just started a new record. Okay, you have a gigantic problem right there. What that means is you can't report. It's almost impossible to report on any of that individual train car data. Because I was able to realize that they were asking the same set of questions multiple times, the solution's easy. Come up with a parent-child relationship with a master detail relationship, which allows you to go from being locked into only 30 possibilities to an infinite number of possibilities. Most trains are at least 100 cars long, so if there's a derailment, I'm going to have more than 30 cars. Another thing that I found was by running Field Trip, there actually weren't many records, maybe 3 or 4%, that went beyond that 25th car. So what that means is we have a lot of wasted real estate dedicated to that many fields. Chances are, if you have an org that is that wide, you fall into that problem where you might be able to get away with a parent-child relationship. Character limits. Well, we have governance limits because we coexist peacefully in the cloud, but we also don't want to knock over each other's walls. So we are confined to limitations on certain pieces of functionality. Formulas are one of the big ones for us declarative admins. 4 years ago, I had a really bad day where I was struggling with a formula field that I just did not feel like root causing or making more efficient. It got the answer out the door and everybody was happy with that contribution calculation. Well, 3,600 characters and the limit on a formula is 4,000. That means is it's counting every single letter in the formula. Are there any formulas in that formula that come in with a character count? Because this is 3,600 characters long, I can't use it downstream in any other formulas because I'm already 90% in the hole. So a couple of fixes to this that is probably common across a lot of formula fields is the API names. Not what you see on the page layout. That's the field label. But the field name is a unique set of characters to define a field. You can shorten those whether you're a solo admin or you work on a team. If you have a standardized naming convention to create acronyms, to create shorthand, use it. When you clean up those field names, as long as you're in the declarative space, so I mean workflow rules, formula rules, validation rules, when you update that API name, it will automatically cascade down to all those other elements. So you only have to touch one place, and you automatically buy back all of that capacity in the formula field. Now, just a disclaimer, where that won't work is if you have any API calls or if you're using applications that have hard-coded references and templates, you will have to go manually change those. But as long as you're in the declarative space, those API names will filter down automatically. So one touch and that's it. The other way to remedy this situation is looking at your nested if statements. If you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over again, then don't. If you can figure out how to leverage it once, do it that way. Again, I was having a bad day, so I didn't. I'm gonna. So profiles, security. Well, if you were to take a look at your list of profiles and you see first names and last names, you have a problem. That means somebody probably was a squeaky wheel and said, well, I have 5 teammates, we all do the same thing, but I have to be able to update one more field than they do. So somebody probably created a security profile for just that one person, which is great. That resolves your issue on the front end. That kills you on the back end, because any new piece of functionality you create, whether it be an object or a field, you have to then go analyze and update all of those profiles based on that new piece of functionality. Even if completely unrelated to that one extra thing they have to do, you need to make sure all of your users can appropriately leverage new functionality going forward. So you're adding burden and workload to the back end. So the cure for too many profiles? The cure is permission sets, the a la carte of additional things your users can do. Permission sets allow you to grab one or as many things, permissions to do, to then be assigned to an individual user. So going back to, you have a team of 5 or 6 people that the core of their work is all the same, but maybe 1 or 2 users have to also be able to update certain fields, or maybe the base profile says there's not even read access to an object, but those 2 people need to be able to at least read the object. You can create permission sets that are very expandable. They are reusable across multiple users. Users can have multiple permission sets. Multiple things can be in permission sets, but that keeps you from having to create additional profiles, which again, on the back end of your workload, is fewer touch points for your new functionality. Page layouts and record types. Well, these can come together harmoniously, but separate, they do some very powerful things. A page layout is exactly as the name would indicate. It's a page for an object where you can indicate what fields the user is going to see. And beyond that, are the fields required? Are the fields read-only? You can set that by page layout. Record types allow you to differentiate your business process in a single object to capture different parts of your overall business process. Going back to the example earlier of many admins using the case object to track their internal work requests while customer service is tracking external customer stuff. Well, the dividing line on that is a record type. There would be an admin record type, for lack of a better word, and there would be a customer record type, again, for lack of a better word. But it allows pick list options to be different, to only show certain options on one record type, and then different pick list options on another record type, but then all reportable in one place. Record type is also awesome because it's a data field, which means it can be used on inputs into workflow rules and validation rules. It can also be changed as a result of those workflow rules or a flow or a process builder. So you can use those automation tools at your disposal to move record types along. I mentioned earlier that record types and page layouts work harmoniously together so that in a process, Salesforce knows who is logged in and accessing a page and what the profile is. Well, you might have a customer service team landing on an account record where they need to update certain fields. You may then have sales land on it where they know information customer service doesn't. So because it's sales, they are required to contribute certain information that you don't want to hold customer service liable for. Page layouts and record types allow you to set different page layouts while that one record exists as its one thing, that one place in the process, and those who are trying to edit it are then able to contribute their specific information instead of holding everybody accountable or not requiring anything. If you have too many restrictions, you're not going to get the information that you need. If you have too few restrictions, you're not going to get the information that you need. So leveraging the combination of profiles, page layouts, and record types allows each of your individual contributors to supply what it is they need to do for overall success. So finally, utilizing your available resources. And by your available resources, I mean the community. I mean, we're all one big happy community, all here to help each other. So my two big spots are Twitter and the success community. On Twitter, my favorite hashtag is AskForce. I get an answer back on my questions within 3 to 5 minutes. That is an amazing turnaround, and it's by other members of the community who are just trying to help people like me. We're all here to help each other. Ask Salesforce, the Twitter handle, is another great place to go. Find your favorite bloggers or podcasters or whoever is doing a lot to contribute to the community and follow them because they're constantly posting a lot of nuggets of knowledge. Also, if you want, feel free to follow me, DZig11, or of course the hosts of this webinar series, Salesforce Admins, no I. If you're on the success community, my favorite groups are the solo admins group because I am a solo admin, reports and dashboards because chances are we're all going to have to report on our data, visual workflow because I love flow, and data governance. Paul Dury, also here in Kansas City, is huge on data integrity and governance, proper governance procedures over the data so that your company, your enterprise can succeed with the information. You'll also find your local user groups and any regional user groups if you feel like going for a little bit of a drive out on the success community. Find the opportunity to actually engage other admins, developers, members of the community face-to-face. User groups are awesome places to do that, and I'm not just saying that because I co-lead a user group. And now I'll hand it back to Mike.
Thanks, Dale. So that was very informative. I want to remind everybody that, of course, we have the Data Quality Trailhead badge, and there was a few questions that came in about that. And we have a new blog post up, Spring Cleaning, Simplifying Your Salesforce Reports. So those are 2 more resources you can use to help clean up your messy org. And of course, you can contact Dale. He is on Twitter at dzig11 and his Gmail address down there. Hopefully we don't just melt your inbox, Dale. We also did a social contest for this webinar, so I want to make sure that we give a shout out to the top 5 tips from the community and the winners of the AwesomeAdmin sunglasses. David, you have a really great tip on documenting preferred naming conventions. Always a fan of that. Not to be followed up by Dave, who obviously wants us to know our business process before implementing. Huge fan. Cheryl, on top of it with knowing the technology to support the clean data. Renee, freeform text fields are always the last option. Yes, and we should probably call out multi-select pick lists as well. And then Polani, of course, using duplicate contact blocker to prevent duplicate contacts. So congrats to the 5 people. Thank you for participating in our Twitter contest. I'm sure we will do this again. We will be in touch with you shortly to get your AwesomeAdmin sunglasses out, and you should tweet us a picture of those. So I think we have just a couple minutes for questions. So I want to remind everybody that we have an admin webinar Q&A group. You can go to bit.ly/admin webinar group, or if you're in the success community, just search on Salesforce admins webinars, and the group will look like that. Dale, one of the questions that came in was around field cleanup, and you mentioned you had a custom object with a lot of extra fields that you no longer use. Do you recommend just hiding those from the page layouts, deleting those, and if so, what are the consequences of deleting those fields that you no longer use?
So yes, to just about all of it. First, hiding the fields once you've built the new structure so that you can divert your users to the new structure. Then migrate that data. If you found a new home for it, migrate that data to the new place, the parent-child structure. Then you can delete the fields. Because if you delete a field, you delete the data, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. So make sure that your data that you want to save still has a home to move to.
Gotcha. Good tip. And then you mentioned a lot in this webinar was about metadata cleanup. Could you elaborate on data cleanup and maybe some of the tools that you use?
Yeah, so we do have Dupe Catcher. We've been using it for a number of years to prevent duplicate contacts on email address because we use our contact base to actually send service-related notifications to our customers. We're also blocking on account name, but when I first started here 5 years ago, I was the first admin, still the only admin. We had a data dump of legacy system data. I spent a year and a half, and that tool saved me because otherwise I was probably going to be just, well, is this a dupe? Is this a dupe? Is this a dupe? And I don't know that I ever would have had it done. So whether it's the Salesforce duplicate blockers or one that you find on the App Exchange, definitely once you've identified what your business rules are around what data means, definitely get data duplication blockers.
Great. Well, looks like we'll button up this part of the webinar, and if you have additional questions, don't be afraid to join our webinar Q&A group on the Salesforce Success community. So with that, and on behalf of all the Salesforce admins, thanks for joining us.